Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the sanctimoniously notorious RMB, coming at you here on my YouTube channel, the Burnettwork. This is, of course, Robservations, the show about something, live chat number 188. Can you believe it's 188? I can't. I wouldn't be here without you guys, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Thank you for being here. As always, this chat is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and you buy any of their products, you can get 20% off your order if you punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity when you check out. So there you go. First of all, right off the top, there were two super chats that came in after I signed off or when I was in the process of signing off yesterday that I wanted to get to. And whenever you guys send in super chats to me, I take them very seriously and they mean a lot. And I hate when I miss them. So General Amelchet asked, Rob, what is your favorite Star Trek skit or parody? Good question. I think at the top, as everyone knows, I think it was 1986. It was William Shatner doing his Get a Life sketch from Saturday Night Live. That's got to be number one. I always loved it. It hit way too close to home. It still is a classic. But lest we not forget, in the 70s, they did a great Saturday Night Live sketch with Chevy Chase. I believe Chevy Chase was Spock and John Belushi was Kirk. And it's all about the cancellation of Star Trek. That was another brilliant Saturday Night Live Star Trek sketch. I really loved that. Living Color did a pretty good Star Trek sketch. And one of my favorite things ever was G4. When G4 was showing the original series, they did these bumpers with the Playmates 8-inch action figures where they were all about the Spock Casa. I've talked about them before. And that one where you're in the Spock Casa and Kirk is making a sandwich and Scotty's bringing the power and Uhura's eating chips on his leather couch, Spock's leather couch. That might be one of my favorites of all time. Jake Yacovetta says, Tyler Nilsson told me on Twitter it's rad. You're looking forward to PBF. PBF. It's not ringing a bell right at the moment. I'm sure I'm looking for it. I'm sure it's I'm not sure what PBF is. But because you know what, there's so much in my head, I'm drawing a blank here. Somebody write in, what is PBF? I don't know what PBF is, but yes, I'm glad he thinks it's rad. I'm looking forward to it. So anyway, I think that that's great. And I want to thank you guys for supporting the channel. Whatever PBF is, I'm sure I'm excited. But you know what I'm more excited about than PBF? I have to tell you. Apocalypse Now Final Cut. Not the Final Cut. Apocalypse Now Final Cut is coming to theaters next week. Now, 1979, 40 years ago, was a big year for film. Dawn of the Dead was released theatrically in this country to the masses. Phantasm came out. Of course, Alien famously came out. Star Trek The Motion Picture is going to celebrate its 40th anniversary come December, along with, lest we not forget, Disney's The Black Hole. All That Jazz is celebrating its 40th anniversary. Some of my favorite films. But also, one of the granddaddies, at least in my own pantheon of great movies, one of the movies that I've probably seen the most, that I love, that I never get tired of watching, is, of course, Francis Coppola's seminal Apocalypse Now, which also was released in 1979. 40 years later, he's putting out what he is calling his definitive version, and it gets released next week, Apocalypse Now Final Cut. Now, as many people know, Apocalypse Now had a very, of course, tumultuous production. Coppola basically financed it himself with his Godfather 1 and 2 and Conversation money. And it had a very difficult shoot. There was a great movie made by his wife. Well, it was not made by his wife, but it was using footage that his wife shot during the production of the film when they were in Thailand and the Philippines and Was it just the Philippines or in Thailand or both? They were all over the place. And there was a great documentary made called Hearts of Darkness. Now, over the course of the years, there was talk that there was a much longer version of Apocalypse Now. Well, let me tell you, first of all, there's longer versions of every movie that has ever been made. Any movie that you pick as your favorite, whether it was Zack Snyder's Justice League, just kidding. No, I'm not actually. Every movie that's ever been made has a much longer cut than what you see in the movie theater. That's how movie making works. When you shoot everything, you put it all together and you start whittling it down. And I mean, if you watched every take from a movie would last hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. That's the process of filmmaking. So hopefully, usually what we get in theaters is, for the most part, the definitive version of that movie. There's a lot of filmmakers that will tell you their theatrical cuts are indeed the definitive versions of their films. I think certainly Spielberg is one of those. Now, Ridley Scott, of course, if you follow the career of Ridley Scott, most of his movies have different versions. Of course, there's a director's cut of Alien. Obviously, Blade Runner has famously many different cuts. There's different cuts of Legend. There's different cuts of The Counselor. There's different cuts of Kingdom of Heaven. Many Ridley Scott movies, The Martian, I much prefer the extended version of The Martian. So Ridley Scott is a director where there's usually two versions of his movies. Well, as many people know, mostly it started in the 90s. I think Film Threat magazine might have been the people that broke this, but there was this long sort of work print version of Apocalypse Now that some people had copies of on videotape, but it had never been released. And then it eventually got released as Apocalypse Now Redux. And famously, the French plantation scene was in that movie, in that version of the film. And there's just a lot more with the men on the patrol boat, a lot of more scenes with the Playboy bunnies, a lot more shenanigans happening in the movie than the sort of 2.5 hour original theatrical cut of the movie. And that eventually got a release. And Lionsgate put out a beautiful Blu-ray set of both the original version of Apocalypse Now and Apocalypse Now Redux and the Hearts of Darkness documentary, which is an amazing package. Well, now, my relationship with Apocalypse Now, I never saw it in the theater. I don't know why. I couldn't get people to take me. My parents, I was 12, so I wasn't going to get in because it was rated R. But for whatever reason, my dad would take me to Phantasm and Dawn of the Dead, but he wouldn't take me to Apocalypse Now. I don't really know why. I mean, my mom took me to see both The Deer Hunter and Coming Home, which is probably why she wouldn't take me to see Apocalypse Now. I think my mom is still traumatized now that she's in her 80s, still traumatized by the experience of seeing The Deer Hunter. She's like, let's go, kids. Let's go take a movie. Let's go see The Deer Hunter. Yeah, well, so I never saw Apocalypse Now in the movie theater. Of course, as soon as it came out on VHS, I got it and I watched it incessantly. I loved Apocalypse Now, the sort of fever dream of an anti-war film that is just epic in scope, and both the performances and the talk about verisimilitude. There are few films, my friends, few films that have the kind of verisimilitude that Apocalypse Now does. There are no optical effects in it other than dissolves and fades. There's no special effects. It's all done for real. There's the helicopter attack on the village is all done for real. It's all practical. It's all insane. And it's crazy. And the film just casts a spell. I've seen it in 70 millimeter. I've seen it in the theater countless times since. I've seen it in my beloved Cinerama Dome here in Los Angeles. I've seen it. I'm sitting, every time I chat to you, you can't really see it, but it's 4 feet across. There's an Apocalypse Now poster, a beautiful Apocalypse Now poster, double framed right here that I look at every day. It's inspirational. I don't think there's ever going to be a movie made, along with things like Lawrence of Arabia. You'll never see a movie like Apocalypse Now ever made again. And if it is, there'll be optical effects. It won't have verisimilitude. I mean, Apocalypse Now, to my mind, is peak verisimilitude, even though it's almost Kubrickian in its conceit. It is Coppola famously said in the documentary, his movie Apocalypse Now is not about Vietnam. It is Vietnam. I mean, he's being hyperbolic. I understood what he was saying, but it's truly an incredible cinematic vision. And it's really interesting. This month, we have two movies, two final cuts from renowned filmmakers. Oliver Stone's final cut of his film The Doors, also about the 1960s, of course, the seminal band, and Apocalypse Now final cut, which begins with a Doors song, famously off their first album. The End is playing over the opening sequence, one of the most stunning opening sequences, I think, in any film ever. I am a Apocalypse Now disciple. I love the film. It's, of course, based on Joseph Conrad's story, Heart of Darkness, and it's loosely based on that, really. And famously, of course, the climax of the movie is very improvised because Marlon Brando wasn't exactly looking the way Coppola thought he was going to look when they started the film. I just think Apocalypse Now is one of the greatest cinematic achievements of all time. I can't get enough of it. And next week, I'm really interested to see Apocalypse Now final cut. Coppola, I believe, I didn't get tickets to this, but is speaking at the Cinerama Dome along with Lawrence Fishburne. Famously, Larry Fishburne. He was called Larry Fishburne, Lawrence Fishburne now. Morpheus himself began his career in Apocalypse Now. I believe he was 14 years old when he appeared in the film. Martin Sheen is in the film. It's Timothy Bottoms is in the movie. Marlon Brando, of course. Harvey Keitel started out in the Martin Sheen role, but was replaced. Martin Sheen, when he was filming, had a heart attack. They lost their helicopters to put down an insurgency at one point. A typhoon destroyed sets, or was it a hurricane? I don't know. And the editing of Apocalypse Now took 2.5 years. And if you break down how many edits are in the movie, they were basically doing 2.5 edits a day, which is a very slow pace. But they were cutting on film then, not digitally, obviously. Apocalypse Now is a stunning achievement. And it's one of those movies, when I think movies, I think Apocalypse Now. And it's, it's funny. When I was a kid, when I was in my teens and I got my VCR at 13, and I was one of the only people that had one, there were certain cult movies amongst my peers. The people that liked movies, my friends, and Apocalypse Now was one of those movies. I mean, you had to have like Clockwork Orange, Apocalypse Now, Dawn of the Dead, of course. And there were movies that were part of this as I was growing up, junior high and high school, that we would talk about and puzzle over and wonder about. And Apocalypse Now is up there. You couldn't be a movie fan and not talk about Apocalypse Now incessantly when I was in junior high and high school, because I first saw it when it finally came out on home entertainment. When it came out on VHS, it was split across 2 tapes, like the Blues Brothers, which was annoying, but you had to deal with it because that was the reality of the situation. But I am a huge fan of Apocalypse Now because, to me, it goes between first of all, the spectacle of it, the way it's shot. Vittorio Storaro's photography is it's unbelievable, and the way the film looks, the sound design, the editorial. I mean, Apocalypse Now and all that jazz are the 2 movies that influenced me the most when I wanted to become a film editor. And I would look at those movies. I still look at those movies and I marvel at the editorial in the films. And of course, Walter Murch has talked a lot about editing that film and doing the sound design on that movie. And if you have a Blu-ray player and you still buy physical media, Apocalypse Now Final Cut is coming out in a special set. It's coming out in 4K. And it's also in that 4K set, you have the theatrical version, you have Apocalypse Now Redux, and Hearts of Darkness are all being re-released, I believe, by Lionsgate. I don't know if it's going to be the same slick packaging the previous set came out of. But I am an enormous fan. I'm so excited, and I can't believe, we live in this time where physical media is, we're in sort of the the twilight maybe of physical media, but we're getting so many wonderful things. I can only imagine how good the 4K of Apocalypse Now Final Cut looks. And it's amazing to me that we're getting all of this material. I ordered from England, The Doors Final Cut has come out, I believe, domestically, but I ordered the 4 disc special edition from the UK. Canal Plus has been putting out 4-disc special editions of movies. They did 4 John Carpenter films. They did, of course, They Live. They did The Fog. They did Prince of Darkness and Escape from New York. And in a 4-disc special edition, the first disc is the 4K disc, then the Blu-ray disc, and special features in the soundtrack album. Kind Hearts and Coronets recently came out from them. But The Doors, which was shipped out to me from England, that's coming. Canal Plus did that. So we're getting a final cut of both The Doors and Apocalypse Now final cut in the same month, which I'm just very, very excited about. And I think that there's, every time I watch Apocalypse Now, there's something more I discover. Now, I have to say, my preferred version of the movie between Apocalypse Now, the theatrical, and Apocalypse Now Redux is the theatrical version. I do think Redux meanders around a lot. In the movie, in the theatrical version, one of the great things that is said in the film, never get out of the boat. Never get out of the boat. Sure as shit, goddamn right. Never get out of the boat. Well, in Apocalypse Now Redux, they get out of the boat too much. They're getting out of the boat to go to the French plantation. They're getting out of the boat to hang out with Playboy bunnies. They're always getting out of the boat. And I liked that in the original version, that staying in the boat is a big deal. It's part of the whole thing. So I'm deliriously excited that Apocalypse Now is going to be rediscovered. If you guys haven't seen Apocalypse Now in the theater, it's getting an IMAX release. I strongly suggest going to IMAX because the sound design is some of the best you'll ever hear. It's one of the greatest in terms of the way it looks and its sound design. Apocalypse Now is one of the most beautiful and one of the most orally stimulating movies. And I say AURAL, not OORAL. Come on, get your heads out of the gutter. But the sound design and the picture of Apocalypse Now is amazing. And seeing it on a gigantic IMAX screen in that thunderous sound system, that's the way to see it. And if you've never seen the film on a big screen, even if you don't have an IMAX screen, if it's coming to a theater near you, please go see it, because it is truly, look, with all the CG and all, you'll be amazed what it's like to gaze on a film where there is no CG. There are no CG backgrounds. There's no visual effects. It's all practical. It'll blow you away. It literally will blow you away. And the film is just a mesmerizing time at the movies. Now, yes, it requires an attention span, but I'm really looking forward to seeing Apocalypse Now Final Cut. I can't wait to see. I know he's retained certain things like the French plantation sequence from Apocalypse Now Redux, but this third official version of Apocalypse Now, Coppola says it's his definitive version. I don't necessarily believe that when filmmakers go back and they change films, which is something I want to do with my own movie, Free Enterprise. I want to do my own final cut of Free Enterprise. But when you have perspective, and remember, there was when Apocalypse Now came out, it was a very legendary film even before it was released, because Coppola, of course, was coming off the great triumphs of both Godfather films and The Conversation, and he'd sort of run off to make this film in Thailand and the Philippines, and people thought he was nuts. And it was taking a really, really long time to make, and people wondered, the Hollywood press was like, where is this movie? Is it some kind of crazy debacle? Is it a masterpiece? What is it? And I think when a movie had as much pre-release hype as this movie did, especially in that day and age, no internet, that the press of the day was worked up into a fever pitch about this crazy movie. And so when it came out, it couldn't possibly have lived up to expectations. And indeed, the word was mixed. However, most people really admired the stunning achievement of Apocalypse Now. I certainly did. And as an adventure story, as a war movie and an anti-war movie, as a character study, and as an examination of the human heart, you can't go wrong. Dennis Hopper's crazed photographer, when Marlon Brando finally does show up, it's amazing. Colonel Kilgore, that Robert Duvall plays, someday this war's going to end. Smells like victory. I mean, there's so many classic scenes in this movie, and it truly is what cinema is all about. And it's the movie the likes of which you will never see again. I cannot recommend more highly that you go see this movie on the biggest screen with the loudest sound system possible, because it truly will change your life. And it certainly did. This teenage kid was irrevocably changed by the experience of seeing Apocalypse Now, and I dearly, dearly loved it. What a great experience. So go, everybody. Go see The Return of Apocalypse Now at a theater near you. Go see it in the biggest theater possible. And I don't want to belabor the point anymore. And I don't want to wax rhapsodic about the film to you right now and get into it, because there's many of you, I'm sure, who have yet to see it. And all I can say is that when you do see it, when you go to the theater and see it, it's one of the most unforgettable movie-going experiences you'll ever have. And I highly recommend having it, because it doesn't come along. It doesn't come along very often. And certainly in this day and age, you're never going to see another movie like it. I don't even think anybody could make a movie like this. I don't even know if you could get insurance to make a movie like this, because nowadays there's no reason to do what they do. But you'll see what peak verisimilitude is, ladies and gentlemen. Peak verisimilitude. That's why I love this movie so much. And it's truly a staggering achievement. But go see it, and I can't wait to hear what all of you have to say when you do, in fact, go see it. Suthius is here. Suthius asks me, hey, Mr. B, why do people get so offended when you criticize artists or content that they like? You think you can do better, is what they'll say. I don't have to do better. I'm just a consumer. Well, Suthius, I think, look, I know for me, I take great pride in the books I read, the comics I love, the movies I've grown up with, and the movies that are near and dear to my heart. And I think we all, as human beings, when we love something, we want others to love it too, because it's a reflection of us. You know, if I say to somebody, this is my favorite movie, I want that person to like it. I'm showing it to them for a reason. And when I meet somebody that is like-minded and we can talk about things, I want us to be able to bond, that special bond that happens when you both realize you do have the same favorite author and you do have the same favorite movies. And, you know, when you can meet the girl of your dreams and she likes a movie you like, you know, that's how I really hooked up with Elizabeth. We both loved Amelie, the movie Amelie. And I know that when somebody likes Amelie, they have a certain kind of personality, somebody I can vibe with, get along with. I know that's the case. So when you don't like something that somebody else likes, they can't help but take it personally. I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to. But, you know, I also know that there's different strokes for different folks. People, it's like Rashomon. You have the same event, but 3 people can tell you a different story about what happened. So the world is made up of differing points of view, and I don't ever get offended when somebody doesn't like something that I love. I understand it, different strokes for different folks. I mean, I'm curious to find out why, because it gives me insight into a person's personality. If they don't like something I like, I'm like, well, why? How dare you, sir? This is a great thing. You should like it. But if you don't, you know. And I think that's what it is. It's people see what they love as an extension of themselves. And when you criticize that extension, they in turn get offended. And I get it. I understand. Because basically, when you're saying you don't like something that somebody likes, you're insinuating that they're an idiot for liking it. And I don't all the time. I don't necessarily think that immediately, but I know a lot of people who do. I know a lot of people that think I'm calling them idiots when I say that their taste is in their ass. My dear, dear friend, Dave Hargrove, still goes on about how much he likes Spielberg's Hook. He's been saying that since the movie came out. And I'm like, that movie is god awful. To me, you know what? The way I think about the Goonies, which I can't stand. I know people are like, oh my God, how can you lie on? I hated the Goonies. I hated it. And the way I feel about the Goonies is the way I feel about Hook. It's like fingers on a chalkboard to me. Can't deal. Don't like it. I understand. But I know people that adore Hook. Usually those are the same people that like the Goonies. And I don't begrudge them that. I understand. They're usually a certain age when they saw it. But so, you know, I can't get offended. Factual Opinion says, I'm waiting for Willow Yang's negative review of the Star Trek movie. I haven't seen any Star Trek movies yet, but I dread the first one when the time comes. I guess, factual opinion, you are speaking about Star Trek the motion picture. It's not like Thanos. Don't dread it. Don't run from it. It's great. Star Trek the motion picture is my favorite Star Trek movie. And by the way, next month, Fathom Events is bringing Star Trek the motion picture back to movie theaters. It's been 40 years later. You can go see it. I would suggest it's not the director's cut, but Star Trek the motion picture looks fantastic. It's been restored. Take a look at it. Go see it in the theater. And remember, it's a different experience than what you might be expecting. Watch Star Trek the motion picture. It's beautiful. It explores the wonder and the unknowability of the cosmos. It's just a great film. I love it dearly. It's flawed. It's not without its flaws, and it had a very tumultuous production process, not unlike Apocalypse Now. But go see Star Trek the motion picture. I think you will be rewarded if, in fact, you do that. So I don't know if Willow Yang would necessarily think that it is a negative review. I have a letter. I have a letter from my boy Paul in Long Beach. Now, full disclosure, Paul in Long Beach heard that I was speaking at a convention in Long Beach, the Midsummer Scream Convention. It's a horror convention / for haunted houses. People put on haunted houses for Halloween. I'd never been there before. It was at the Long Beach Convention Center. It was great. And Paul from Long Beach contacted me through the website. So if you want to contact me, you can at theburnetwork.net. You can also read all the letters that I read. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. And, you can check out the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery. Anybody who's interested in your fellow members of the Post-Geek Singularity, the website, theburnetwork.net, is where we all go. It's like a town. It's like town center where you can all go and converse and post your wares and your things that you like and talk about yourselves. And you can comment on other people's letters that I read on the show. We have them featured on the website where you can go and comment. So there is Paul from Long Beach who's written me many letters. I talked to Paul. I was going to try and hook up with him. We had to get down to Long Beach. And then once we got there, it was so busy. There was hardly anywhere to park. There was so much going on. It was just packed. So, and then afterwards I called Paul and I just couldn't make it work. And by his own admission, and I could kind of tell this, Paul was grilling steaks and drinking some beers. And after our panel, we went to dinner with the panelists, the people that were on the panel. And I talked to Paul twice, but then after it was over, it was too late. And I figured he was already well on his way to being 3 sheets to the wind. And I didn't want to harsh his mellow. But anyway, so this letter comes from Paul in Long Beach. Yes, I know what the PGS is thinking. Wait, Rob was in Long Beach and didn't hook up with Paul? And you would be correct in asking a basic query, as Robert was 1 whole mile from my home on Saturday. Well, let me tell you, back in his dating days, he must have been more notorious than sanctimonious because the cheesy bastard stood me up. Tell him, Rob. I didn't stand you up because we talked. It would be fair to ask, well, Paul, why didn't you tread the entire 20 blocks downtown? I have 2 answers. A, I'm a happily married man who promised his wife an afternoon of feet in the kiddie pool, cocktails, barbecue, and a Yankees game on TV. B, I had an afternoon of feet in the kiddie pool, cocktail, barbecue, and Yankees game on TV. It was the perfect Long Beach day. Of course, everyone, I'm joking about some things, only some though. It was a last-minute opportunity that didn't happen. In fact, when Rob called me in the evening, I was shoveling a steak down my pie hole, and I was 3 sheets to the wind. That's true, I could tell. And if I'm gonna meet you for the first time, I should probably be sober. No, not true. You didn't have to be. The second and third times, though, maybe next time, buddy. Cheers, Paul. Well, I want to thank Paul for that because, yes, I was looking forward to meeting him, and it was a last-minute thing. But I tried, man. I tried. But, we'll make it work. We'll make it work. I love Long Beach. We can make that work. So I want to thank Paul for that. I've got a few letters to read. Got some good ones, actually. First of all, this letter. This is a really short one, but it comes from Mason and Dave from Ottawa. Hey, Rob and fellow members of the Post-Geek Singularity. I am starting my first paying job in a few days, and I'm curious as to what your first job was. Thanks for answering my question, and live long and prosper. Mason and Dave from Ottawa. Well, that's actually a good question. I always love to know what people's first paying jobs were. My first paying job, aside from doing yard work and mowing lawns and stuff like that, I had a paper route. Yes, that's true. I delivered the Seattle Times, and there were 53 homes on my paper route, and the Seattle Times was delivered in the afternoon. So I made my rounds. It usually took me about an hour to do my paper route around my block, and then I had to get up in the morning on Saturdays and Sundays and deliver the paper. Sundays were, of course, the bitch because they were the biggest papers, and they were rough. And Saturday mornings, I skied when I had my paper out. I skied. My school district took us up skiing on the weekends if you wanted to go, because we were spoiled middle class kids. So yes, we would go skiing. I mean, we had to pay for it, but so what I had to do was I had to get up really early on Saturdays and deliver my papers before I got to the buses, which I think I had to be there at 6 a.m. So that was rough. So I had to get up like 4:30 to deliver my papers, but it was all right because we had like a 2-hour ride to the mountain, whether it was Crystal or Stevens Pass. So that's cool. And I could sleep, and that was fine. And my second job, which I did concurrently with my paper route, was I worked at Framer's Studio. I basically had a job. My good friend Jolie Von Sur, who I went to school with, her mom, Cynthia, gave me my job. My dad used to call Cynthia, Jolie's mom, Mrs. Robinson. And those of you who have seen The Graduate knows what he means. And it was very true. Cynthia was a very beautiful, very elegant woman who I admired greatly. She also was instrumental in getting me my first job on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. So I worked in a frame store. I framed pictures. I cut glass. I cut molding, put picture frames together. Basically, they taught me how to do it. I was apprenticing there, and that was a job, and it was cool. The only reason I was interested is because I wanted to frame my own movie posters, my own one sheets, and it was cheap. So they put me to work. So my first two jobs were I framed pictures, and starting at 14 and at 13, I want to say maybe I was 12, I had a paper route. So those were my first paying jobs. It's actually a good question. I was very entrepreneurial. I mean, I still the same thing. I wanted model kits and blank videotapes and that. So I always had to have jobs, multiple jobs at the time. So that's what I did. But a good question, Mason A. What is your first paying job? And congratulations on acquiring that job. Here's some advice. Always be 10 minutes early, and always be the last to leave unless you were supposed to lock up or count the till. That can always be a pain in the ass. Never be late. That's my advice to you. Never be late. And if you are late, don't make an excuse. Just apologize profusely. Let's see. This one comes. This is an interesting letter. I like this letter. This letter comes from Richard Green. Hey, Rob. This is an observation I made while writing a novel I would like to turn into a screenplay later. Through my writing experience, I've come to understand how hard it is for films to avoid plot holes and logic errors. You really have to think ahead and anticipate an audience finding a why didn't they just do such and such instance, or logic and science and so forth. It's tough. But in real life, these logic errors are real because we don't always think of the most logical thing to do or say in the moment. It makes me realize how tough it is to keep a story very logical. I'm trying to stick with as much real science as possible with no wire stunts. The story takes place in its own world to avoid many such logic errors. Earth doesn't exist in the story. However, it still feels very Earth world, much like the universe of Star Wars. I do have an alien monkey stowaway on the ship that is vital to the story. Well, of course you do, Richard, because every story needs an alien monkey stowaway that is vital to the story. After seeing Aladdin, I began to feel that monkey sidekicks are overdone. Granted, this one is an alien-like creature that resembles a monkey. With Dora and Aladdin, I'm starting to feel monkeys are overdone. Well, Richard, everyone knows you can never have enough monkey in your life. Never. Monkeys are never overdone, especially alien monkeys. And all the key to it, I mean, Clint Eastwood made 2 monkeys with an orangutan. I know an orangutan is not exactly a monkey, but it's close. Never go wrong with monkeys. They just have to be well written and never use them. You should never laugh at the monkey. You should laugh with the monkey. Remember, situational humor is best. You never want to denigrate your characters or make them the butt of a joke unless it's integral to the story. Another character can make a character the butt of the joke, but just don't make your characters in or out to be buffoons. That's what I would say to you. Nobody likes a buffoon. Nobody likes that. Never compromise your characters for cheap laughs. It's not good. Don't enjoy it. Let's see. I've got a letter. This is actually, there's some good ones here. This one's really good. I like this letter a great deal, actually. This is from Liam Corrigan, and it comes all the way from Japan. It's a great letter. Hi, Rob. Greetings from Japan on what is yet another very hot summer day. I've been listening to a lot of your shows recently, and I especially enjoy hearing the passion with which you speak about Star Trek and the superhero genre. These are both things close to my heart. I'm currently on a rewatch of Star Trek The Next Generation to prepare for the upcoming Picard series, and as I've mentioned in previous letters to you, I was raised on Christopher Reeve's Superman movies and love them dearly. Yes, even the fourth one. However, friends of mine say that neither a sci-fi show as positive as TNG nor a superhero movie as bright and colorful as Superman the movie would be greenlit today. It's all about being gritty and realistic these days, apparently. They say nobody wants pure and innately good characters like Superman or leaders as unswervingly positive and driven by justice as Jean-Luc Picard. The often quoted and, in my opinion, misused term is relatability. We need characters who are broken in some way, who have human flaws so that we can relate to them. Well, pardon my language, but I say, fuck that. When I sit down to watch a movie or a TV show, I want to escape from the cynicism and drudgery of daily life. I don't want my Superman to be broken, prone to human error, or beset by emotional angst. I want to see what I believe Superman has always been. The very best aspects of the human spirit. Selfless, courageous, uncompromising in his goodness and positivity. The big budget car crash that was Star Trek Discovery is another example of this sad trend. Constantly pushing these dark and depressing themes in order to create relatability. Actually has the opposite effect on me. I think Star Trek Discovery has actually given me forms of brain cancer. That's I don't want to take away from anybody who's suffering that horrible disease, but okay, I was making a bad joke. You know what? I retract that. Shouldn't make jokes like that. I won't, even if it's true. What writers seem to forget is that this constant quest for darkness and angst, not only do characters become unrelatable, they also become unlikable. Discovery is a prime example of this. In the first episode, they killed off Captain Georgiou, who seemed to be the only character true to the values of Star Trek, and make the mutineer who caused the incident that got her killed the main focus of the show. It's completely nonsensical. Not only is it nonsensical, but they didn't show enough of an arc of her being redeemed. She just was great again. Going back to Superman, as much as the movie had issues, one of the things I loved about Justice League was the way in which, for the last 20 minutes at least, Superman was finally allowed to be Superman. No angst, no insecurity, just the big blue Boy Scout kicking the bad guy's ass and doing so with a smile on his face. It's such a shame that movie didn't do so well, as DC finally seemed to have got the character right. But that brings me finally to the point of this letter. Are we just too cynical these days to accept a character as pure of heart and motivated by truth and justice as Christopher Reeve's Superman? Would Picard's powerful speeches on human rights, values, and freedoms be dismissed these days as just another social justice warrior agenda? What do you think, Rob? Will we ever see unapologetically positive portrayals of the characters that we love on screen ever again? I sure hope so. Thanks, and keep up the good work, Liam Kerrigan. Liam, a fantastic letter. I want to thank you for writing that in. It's a question that I grapple with all the time, just in my own life, Unfortunately, I think we in our modern age have forgotten how to write such characters. We now know that most people have a darkness inside them somewhere, and to make things more gritty and realistic, to have characters as squeaky clean as Superman was originally written, probably wouldn't play in this day and age. But I, like you, would say, well, that is a real challenge. How do you make Superman relevant to this day and age? How do you make any of these characters? I have always been under the impression that my Star Trek characters were the elite. They were the best of the best. Even that's frowned upon now. We can't, oh, God forbid we have people that are really good at their jobs and really studied hard and busted their ass, because that diffuses the narrative that we all are equally important in the eyes of the world. And I would say that isn't true. That's not true. Not every kid gets a trophy. Not everyone's going to grow up and realize their dreams. So, and life is hard enough. I like watching shows about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, or Picard and company, because they are inherently good people. And despite the fact that they might know that they're coming up against something that they might be ill-suited for, they push through, they persevere, they get it done, because ultimately humanity wins out in the end. You know what I think's happened to us? I honestly believe that our culture no longer has a collective dream at all. We have personal dreams, but those are inherently personal. They're selfish. And I'm selfish about what I want to do, but America doesn't have a dream. America doesn't have a place to go. I keep thinking about Yuval Harari's book, Sapiens. And at the end of that book, Harari asks, what is it that we want as a species? You know, my whole thing is that I grew up in a world where John F. Kennedy, our great President Kennedy, well, whether he was great, you know, allow me my nostalgic hindsight. I never knew the man. He was dead before I was born, but I love watching his speeches. And of course, he was a World War II hero, but he talks about, and I get it, going to the moon was all political. We had to beat the Soviet Union. I get it. I do. But the people that actually worked on the moon landing were doing it because they were trying to do something that hadn't been done before. And when John F. Kennedy gave that rousing speech talking about, we are going to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. He galvanized an entire country, you know, all of our great scientists, all of our, whether they're aerospace scientists, whether they're physical scientists, whether they're astronaut or aeronautical scientists. We had the best minds in the world working on the Apollo program and getting men to the moon because they believed these people were dreamers. They wanted to make it happen. It was very important. We as a nation, collectively, we are split down the middle. You know, if you put guns in everyone's hands, I have no doubt that we would start shooting at one another and a civil war would break out in moments. We as a country, whatever side of the aisle you're on, whether you're left or right, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, we are all at our baseline Americans. And we should figure out what if we go back to Yuval Harari's book, we should ask ourselves, what do we want? You know, and only I think, and again, I'm looking at this from an idealized standpoint. World War II, we collectively wanted to go kick German ass. And I think we had the middle class after World War II. And then we had John F. Kennedy saying, we're going to go to the moon in 10 years. And we did. America needs a dream. And once we have a collective dream, once we can believe in America, I mean, every American's cynical about their own country. You know, how are you supposed to be in the world that we live in today? If you guys go watch the series Years and Years, the new HBO series that Russell T. Davies wrote, 6 episodes long. It's about a near future Britain, but it's through the whole show's through the eyes of a family from 2019 to 2034. It is chilling. It is so accurate. It's scary. But basically, we're in a position where we're watching the world coming apart at the seams, and we're cynical because we've been taught to be cynical. You know, when you have young white men writing manifestos on 8chan and then going up and shooting up bars or a Walmart and killing people willy-nilly, it's a little hard to, you know, believe in truth, justice, the American way. And I understand that, but we can bring back the collective dreams of mankind. Now, I don't know how to do that, but I just saw a thing about some kid at a science fair, so I guess a high school student, figured out how we could extract all the plastic from the ocean. That's something Superman would do. I think that we have people now doing these things. We should celebrate that. America needs collective dreams. And once we get back on track and we're less cynical people and people start taking responsibility for the fact, I mean, on Twitter, people they come at me and they're like, well, no, I don't believe that there's always been climate change. Why should we believe that mankind had anything to do with it? And I go back, I'm like, really? Well, did mankind have something to do with the plastic gyres in the oceans? How much plastic? What about the runoff from Fukushima that we've never been able to going into the oceans? What about all the pollution, the CO2 going into the air? What about the groundwater that's being contaminated by runoff from factories? What about all those things? Do all those things have no effect? You don't leave, I've always said this, you don't leave your kitchen 10% dirty so food can rot away and fester. And why aren't we keeping the planet clean? I mean, why do we justify it? I mean, we're trying to, I literally have people on social media justifying why we are polluting, saying it's not that big a deal. How about no pollution? I mean, when somebody pollutes, it comes right back to us. You know why? Because it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets moved around. It's like being a little kid trying to eat vegetables. You move the vegetables to either side of your plate, hoping your mom thinks you ate them. She knows what you're doing. I don't understand how come we don't feel that way about the environment. How about not dump anything in the environment that's bad? Why do that? I don't know. Humanity needs a collective dream. Then our heroes can be, we can enjoy our heroes with impunity again. It's almost like we're not given the luxury of having heroes like Superman anymore, which I think is lame. Lame. Anyway, what do you guys think? Am I wrong? Am I off base? I might be. I don't know. What do you think? So I've got another letter. This letter comes from James Sparrow. This is kind of an interesting letter. And again, all of the letters that I read are on the website. So you can go to the website, you can comment on them, you can interact with the letter writers. I would assume that they go and they look, so you can go enjoy these letters on the website and interact, which is pretty cool. Laser Bob. Of course, that's what I was called when I worked at Silver Platters from 86 to 88. I was Laser Bob. I wrote my column, The Laser Visions of Laser Bob. Laser Bob. This video is in reference, or this letter is in reference to the video Breaking Up as Picard to Do. Love the title of this video. That was a Norman Lau suggestion. Very reminiscent of Walter Simonson titles on Thor. I feel the same about Star Trek The Motion Picture. Very much my favorite Star Trek movie. I had chills when Scotty flew the shuttle pod over the Enterprise, as well as when the Enterprise left dry dock. I remember asking a friend what he didn't like about the movie, being a non-Trek fan, and he stated that he wanted more ships and space battles, and both issues were fixed in The Wrath of Khan, thus making it more for the average moviegoer. When the next generation, I remember making constant references. I guess what he wanted to say is, when the next generation was on, I remember making constant references to it looking like the Love Boat. It took me years to warm up to it. Anyway, my question is this. If Star Trek The Motion Picture never happened and the Star Trek Phase 2 series came to be instead, how do you feel this would have impacted your fandom with the franchise? I realized Your and my favorite Star Trek movie would have never happened, but Gene Roddenberry would have been much more involved, I think more so than in TNG. What about your thoughts? Thanks, James Sparrow. P.S. I love that first Star Trek technical manual as well. Well, James, a good question. As many people know, they tried to bring Star Trek back in fits and starts throughout the 70s. Philip Kaufman, who later went on to direct The Wanderers and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and who gave George Lucas the idea for Indiana Jones, he was going to make a Star Trek movie called Star Trek Planet of Titans. And that would have brought back the original cast and dealt with the gods of Olympus and all kinds of craziness. The Discovery is actually an ancestor of the Ken Adam and Robert McQuarrie designed Enterprise from the Planet of the Titans aborted movie, which a lot of people don't know, but it is. Brian Fuller picked that out because he liked that ship. I like the original version too. I don't like how they reworked it. They took away, apparently the producers wanted to get rid of circular warp nacelles, which I'm like, why would you want to do that? That's not cool. Well, anyway, I like circular warp nacelles. But anyway, so Planet of the Titans didn't happen. And then they started making the Star Trek Phase 2 television series, and 13 episodes were commissioned, including, and what's interesting is fan films have turned some of these episodes into movies, like the Klingon episode K'Tumba was done by James Cawley's Star Trek New Voyages. They did K'Tumba. And Next Generation, during the writer's strike and in season 4, John Povill's script, The Child, which also Next Generation or New Voyages made. The Child was the first episode of the second season of Next Gen. That was originally written for the Star Trek Phase 2 series. And Devil's Due, which was in the 4th season of TNG, was also a script commissioned during the time of the Phase 2 series. It was going to be 13 episodes. It never got made. After the success of Star Wars, they folded the entire enterprise. See what I did there? They folded it all up and they turned it into Star Trek the Motion Picture. And with Star Trek Phase 2, Lieutenant Ilia was cast. Persis Khambatta was going to be that. David Gautreau, who you see it in the Epsilon 9 station in Star Trek the Motion Picture, was going to play Lieutenant Zahn, a Vulcan. And what do I think would have happened if they had made a Star Trek 2 television series? I would have lost my mind. Because I was 78, 10, 11, 12. The fact that Star Trek would come back with mostly the original cast, that would have been mind-blowing. I would have loved that. I think it would have done really, really well. In the wake of Star Wars, people were starved for more science fiction. We got Battlestar Galactica. I think, like Star Trek the Motion Picture, which also was a huge hit, I think a Star Trek television series done in 77, 78, 79 would have been a monster show. It probably would still be running now. I mean, I think it could have been an amazing thing. I think Star Trek still would have been here. It probably would have eventually made the transition to the big screen, I would imagine, depending on the ratings. And maybe we would have got Star Trek 2 again. I don't know. But I do know that the show was good. It was really good. I mean, Star Trek Phase 2 had some great scripts. And if you're interested in this lost period of Star Trek history, there is a great reference book written by Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens, who are two of my favorite Star Trek novelists. They're also screenwriters. They've been television producers. They wrote a book called The Lost Years, all about the Star Trek 2 series and what happened and who did what. Fantastic book. I can't recommend it highly enough. So check it out. Another great letter. Fantastic letter. Let's see if anybody else is here. It's always interesting to wonder, like, what's going to happen. Or what did happen. I always like speculating about those things. It always keeps me wondering. Stubble McShave said, the Superman letter made me want to answer about character flaws. It will take too long for a super chat, so I'll write a letter on it. We'll see if you read it. Well, Stubble McShave, if you're going to write me a letter on character flaws, please do. I can't wait to read that. I'll be very interested. Willow Yang says, I will review Star Trek the Motion Picture. I just need to finish writing up on the animated series, Spock's Brain, The Next Generation, and a bunch of stuff first. And Willow, take all the time you want. As Louis Armstrong sang in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, we have all the time in the world. Anyway, there you go. You got my Rod Serling yesterday. Today you got my Louis Armstrong. So there you are. Impressions with Robert Meyer Burnett. Time enough for love to unfold, or life to unfold. All the precious things love has in store. Anyway, yes, that's from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. We have all the time in the world. I will refrain from singing Do They Know Where Christmas Trees Are From? You'll have to watch the movie for that. Willie Yang also says, to be honest, I don't think you'll like what I have to say, although I do assure a factual opinion that he doesn't need to dread the movie. I don't know. Did you watch the director's cut? I don't dread anything you have to say, Willow Yang. There's nothing you can say that would make me dread you. I am not like Kay in Godfather 2. I dread you, Michael. I don't dread you, Willow. You can say what you want. That's why I love you, because your opinion matters. It matters to me, and it matters to the rest of this, the Post-Geek Singularity. So I want to thank you for that, Willow. And by the way, you've set yourself up. Better get those letters to me. Well, guess what, everybody? I got to say, I'm bringing this one to a chat early. It's been an hour. It's an hour-long show today. I've read all the letters. All your chats have been great. I want to thank you for that. I'm going to get off the phone. I got off the phone. I'm going to get off the show. I've got work to do. I've got a pretty interesting meeting tonight. Conference call with South Korea on a project. Pretty exciting. Very excited about that. Maybe I'll tell you more about that at some future date. Can't tell you anything about it now, but it's happening and it's fun. So I want to say thank you, first of all, to all the moderators, Jim, Detective Jim, Greg, Terry, and, of course, Mike Bodden, the Honorable Mayor Bodden. I want to thank all of you, members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, for being here, for being nice to each other, and also for supporting me both through the channel and through Super Chats and all the generosity you are sending our way. And again, go to the website, theburnettwork.net. Check it out. Interact there. I want to make it sort of a destination fan place. If you like these chats, please hit like. Please hit the bell. Subscribe. I can't tell you, that helps me out. YouTube analytics are so crazy. I'm watching people that I've been following for years just disappear from my feed. It's very odd. It's very strange. It's very disconcerting. So I want to thank all of you, and mention all of those things. I also want to say thank you once again to Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great. You can go to their website and you can punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity and get 20% off of your order. And once again, please look in your hometown. Find out if Apocalypse Now is playing at a theater near you. Go see it at the biggest sound system or the biggest screen possible. By the way, on totally unrelated note, I just heard today on the John Campea show that I was on, but I had not heard this, that they are releasing Dolby in conjunction with AMC, are bringing back The Matrix, the original 1999 Matrix, to Dolby theaters, remixed in Atmos. It's going to be the remastering they did for the 4K discs, which are stunning. The movies never looked so good, so you might want to look into that. I think it's the last week of this month. Apocalypse Now, the final cut opens next week. Check it all out. Go get tickets. I want to hear you guys go to the movie theater with all your friends and family. Have a great time at Apocalypse Now, because that's our motto, Apocalypse Now. And everybody should, listen and heed the wisdom of Walter Kurtz. But I want to, going to the theater and seeing these classic movies, especially Apocalypse Now and The Matrix, are going to give you, it'll be truly Apocalypse POW when you go see it in IMAX. It'll be great to check it out. So please do that. And I want to see more movies restored, more classic films brought back to the cinema, which I think is fantastic. So I'm going to end today's chat, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to end it, and I'm going to say, as always, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I bid you all farewell, and as always, have a better day.